I'm Rochelle Greayer. I'm a garden designer and writer and garden blogger, and I've written a book, Cultivating Garden Style. And today I'm going to share with you some tips for making your own garden an extension of your own personality. This cafe is really quite funky. I really just kind of love the way Christy and Coralie, the owners, have meshed together their styles and mixed it up with found furniture, and everything's for sale, and it's kind of this nice mashup, just like the book. Most of the time, you start out with looking at somebody's home and what they're wearing, and you get a really good sense of somebody's tastes and how they want to present themselves and how they like things to be from that. And that's really the best place to start. If a designer can do that, certainly you can do that yourself. I like to name my styles, and I do that in the book. Every chapter is sort of named. One thing I do is I kind of look to historic styles, but I try to put a modern twist on it, or something that maybe is a little bit different. Honestly, if I can name it in 2 words, like we do with the chapter titles, I can start building something around that. For example, rustic Zen, and we all have this idea of what Zen is, and it can be very formal. But when you add the word rustic in, it suddenly becomes very different, and you can start to think of things that are more warm and homey and not so Zen, perhaps, and you start to create something new and interesting. I love grasses. Handsome prairie is a style. It really depends on grasses. I live in New England, where there are a lot of trees. My garden is sort of naturally forested, and if I didn't touch it, it would just grow in on top of itself. So I like to mix in a little bit of a woodland sort of theme. We have a chapter called Forest Temple, which I think is just so perfect for a garden like mine. But I also like to grow things, and I'm very practical, and I like to experiment, which, you know, I think is really kind of the essence of the homegrown rock and roll chapter. In the spring and in the fall, the days are much shorter. The natural light is just not there. It really cozies up a space by just adding some fairy lights and some candles and, you know, adding the warmth just with that. But then there's all kinds of outdoor upholstery, cushions, rugs. I think those things add a lot of warmth. And then I think the other thing is to kind of learn to appreciate the garden as it fades into fall or is coming into its own in the spring. Dying flowers are quite beautiful. Some people can see them just as dying flowers, whereas if you kind of change your perspective and see that they are actually very pretty in different shades of brown and reds, and particularly where I live, yellows and oranges, it's stunning. We have a few DIY projects. We have some lighting ideas, ways of making things much more decorative than maybe you might normally think to do in the garden. And even with pots, I think personalize them, make them more interesting if you can't find one that's really expressive, and maybe let the pot be the central design focus, and then keep the planting simple, you know, one plant. For me, I prefer the one plant, one pot sort of idea, because it's much easier to take care of. But personalizing pots is one of my own personal ways of keeping it interesting when I just have a corner. I love antique shops. We have a couple big fairs in New England too, like flea markets, interesting sort of industrial items, and I don't know, I've seen people do old watering animal feeders and troughs. I think you look for nice shape and be practical about it. Like, make sure that the plants are going to have enough room to actually grow, and it's not just something that's going to look good for a day and then the plant's going to die because it doesn't have the room to grow. Repurpose things. Use scrap wood, scrap metal, whatever you can get your hands on, and mess with it. The fun of a garden is, whether you like it or not, it isn't going to be done itself. You're going to put together a garden, and you might love it today, but, you know, 3 months from now it's going to look very different. The fun, personally for me, of gardening is, and designing gardens, is just constantly changing them and going with the changes that are happening naturally. It's going to grow, it's going to get bigger, you know, things are going to die, you're going to have a hole to fill, you know, you're going to have to go with the adventure of it.